Now I'm seeing a lot of ambassadors talking about the gateway now has to hold the context, has to have meaningful state for you to actually why you should consider an AI gateway. So are we telling that people and organizations running API gateway should take a deep look and start running an AI gateway?
What most organizations nowadays, what they are saying when they talk about AI gateways is they talk about gateways for AI services. So, gateways for like LLMs and these kind of things.
In the last 15 years, right? How do you think this whole developer portal has evolved?
I think the big change has been that developers nowadays are not just developers, like the usual ones, but they also may be agents, right? So those ones behave very differently.
Is multi-gateway still a challenge? At least in my view, 90% of the organizations I still see running at least 3 of them or 2 of them.
I don't think it's a good idea to try to get to just one API gateway. I think that's just not going to be the reality. Even if you can somehow make it happen now.
All right, so I think let's start. So Eric, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of our series. And yeah, we've been associated, know each other for a long time, working in this space, and why this session is important for us, and also like it's the right juncture for us to talk because there's a lot of things happening, especially in this AI space, where API is becoming the fulcrum and API becoming the foundation. So we thought there cannot be a better person for us to bring on board to talk and have about this discussion, and also like congrats for your new gig with Gentic as well. So it's
Thank
it's
you.
it's a nice juncture. So yeah, welcome you for this session, and yeah, maybe you need maybe take another 30 seconds. Why don't you introduce yourself to the people who don't know you, which is a rare scenario, but still it'll be good for you to introduce yourself.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me, Sean. So it's nice to be here. So yeah, so my name is Erik Wilde. I've been in the API space for quite a while. I've been working with vendors in the API space for a while, with organizations selling just API management products. And then most recently, I've joined Gentic, and we're a startup. So our claim is that we're building the bridge from API land into AI land. What that may mean, I think we get to discuss. But yeah, thanks a lot for the invite. I appreciate it. And I'm sure we have a lot of things that we can talk about, Jan.
Thank you. Yeah, so maybe I'll take 10 seconds. So I'm Shan, and I'm the Chief Product Officer for Digital API. And this is my first startup gig as well, but really thoroughly enjoying every day. Every day is a surprise, like thanks to my boss who's keeping me in that situation, and thanks to the industry as well, right? Every week when I come up with a new strategy and a proof point, that maybe looks something completely different the next week, which I've never seen. The industry was evolving so fast, but it's a great sign, like at least all of us and the industry are doing something together to move forward. So today we were thinking why this topic, right? Since we are into a business of building marketplace and portals, and then we are seeing there is a massive interest and appetite coming in the industry. Usually these kind of interest comes from banking and insurance industries, but this is the first time we are seeing where even non-financial services are actually very keen to get this portal or the platform or the marketplace right. And to be very specific, telco is actually on the drive. I'm seeing coming from open travel. I'm seeing coming from pharma, life sciences. So even though all these players are being active in the API space, I've not seen them this active where they want to actually get that foundation right, and they want to kickstart their AI journey, right? With that, Eric, I just want to actually ask you this. In the last 15 years, right? From
Wow.
being a single page application where you start showing something called as an API as a tile, and then where we are today. What is your experience of how do you think this whole developer portal has evolved? And then I would also want to understand a bit more, is that what last 15 years will be changing in the next 15 months? Or do you think it's just more of a hype and not a reality where things are going to be evolving faster purely from a platform or a portal space?
That's a big question. Yeah, last. Tell me about the last 100 years of APIs. So yeah, I think what we started with quite a while ago was being excited about the fact that you can just do things with APIs. And I think that's what got organizations interested in the first place. But I think what we now see is more that organizations are realizing we need to really make sure we have everything that we have available in a digital way so that everybody can develop and kind of leverage what we have digitally. And I think that's really the main thing that I've seen where one of the big trends have been how can we make sure we have everything in place so that all of our capabilities are available through our portal and they're available at a high quality and they're available at the way that developers expect them to be. I think the big change has been that developers nowadays are not just developers like the usual ones, but they also may be agents, right? So those ones behave very differently. They have different constraints and capabilities from human developers. But I think that's, for me, that's why I joined Agentic, the company that I'm with right now, because I think that switch from focusing on just human developers to also more automated AI-oriented developers or whatever you would call those agents, right? That's, I think, is kind of a new twist to the whole space. So I'm curious where this will lead us. I think we're all still figuring it out. It's not quite sure where we will get with this, but that's for me the most exciting development in the last few years, let's say.
Yeah, so Eric, you talked about a very interesting subject, right? Developers, not it's a new norm now, right? In the last 4 5 years, there is not a lot of focus on runtime on a portal, right? So we always think it has to be enabler, it has to be a provisioning medium, it has to be like more of how do you bring things under one umbrella, right? But in the last, especially after like there is so much of push on AI, right? Even as simple as someone is trying to get all the LLMs to be registered and consumed in one common place, don't you think there is a lot more push happening on platforms like this where the design time aspect is coming lower and lower and where the runtime aspect is coming more and more? Do you think is that a right direction? Because again, it varies from industry to industry. A bank will be very, very cautious of what they put from a runtime perspective on an external facing portal. But then if you talk about a retail or an e-commerce or a real estate will like to have this more to really get that USP saying, you know what, I'm doing something different in the market, right? What is your take on that? Do you really see that push is happening that where we need to bring more and more of runtime aspect to the platform, or do you think it still has to be balanced?
That's a very good question. So I guess my bet is yes. That's why I am where I am. Um, because I think the runtime aspect is going to be more important. And that's because I think, it used to be that we would use APIs to develop applications, right? So it was very much developer-centric focus where developers build applications and then those applications are in place for a while and we might switch them or tune them, but that's kind of what we do, right? And I think with AI and agents, we are much more in that phase of an agent wants to just get something done and they know you have many, many, many APIs in your organizations, but they also want to figure out which APIs could I actually use, right? So they have this runtime expectation of saying, in order to get this done, what are the best capabilities to use? And I think that's not something we've seen so far. So I think that's a really new requirement that comes into the whole space. And I haven't seen that being discussed a lot. So, for example, in the whole MCP discussion, right, the assumption I think kind of still is that you do know which MCP tools you do want to know in advance, right? So MCP doesn't even look at this kind of runtime aspect. So yeah, I think it's really, I think this is where things are going. I should be able to find out at runtime which are the things that I need to use to solve this problem. And I need a high quality answer, ranked well, giving me good quality APIs. And whoever can do that best is probably going to empower my my AI applications best, right? So yeah, I think that's a new challenge that we're facing. We haven't faced before. So yeah, I think it's still, the jury is still out how to best do that. It's a relatively new challenge, but it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, so see that's again right. So very basic example, documentation, right? All these days we were just coming up with documentation to please a bunch of people who are looking into the portal, right? Now I don't know what exactly is that high quality to actually please an agent, right? Or please an MCP, right? Is there something carved in stone? Is this the way we need to do it? I don't know, right? We as a company, we thrive every month to get that. We also we keep talking about it's not anymore about a user sitting behind the scene looking at it. It's also an agent behind the scene has to appreciate what we have come up with. So with that, I also would like to segue into it, right? So in the last 10 years, there is always this debate, build versus buy. World love it, right? And every organization, there is one ambitious chief architect or there's an ambitious head of technology who thinks, you know what, this is what I want to do and I have to go build it. Or there is also a lot of practical solution architecture people who makes a decision. Maybe if I purely look from a dollar value or if I look from a TCO or I look from what is that needed for the hour, they either go ahead, see whether there's a solution outside, bring it on board, and see how you can fine tune it. Not a lot of companies give you that flexibility, but there are platforms do it. And the second category of it, every gateway comes up with their own platforms and portals offer as a freebie, right? So the organization who also think they can build on top of that, right? So what is your view? Is the world still stuck with this build versus buy debate every time an organization thinks they have to become a portal first company? Or what do you think? Because I see till every time we respond to an RFI, this is a question asked: should I build or should I buy? Right? Do you think even in the agent era is the question really relevant, or what is the smart thing you think an organization should do?
To some extent, that's a very generic question, right? And this generic of should I build or should I buy question, the right answer always is like, where do you generate value, right? Is that where you see yourself generating value, building that component or not? I don't, in many cases, right? I mean, we've been in the space for a long time, but there's so many tools you can find, right? If you look into whatever overview of API tools that you can find, if you look into that, you'll find that in even if kind of the most obscure kind of cases that you could imagine, you will find a whole bunch of tools doing just that. So in my mind, that's not even like a good question to ask. It's like in very few, very few occasions you would want to build your own stuff. It feels like, back in the day, people would ask, should I build my own API gateway? And yeah, it was, sometimes it wasn't that easy to convince people that no, you probably shouldn't do that because there are companies doing just that and they might be at least as good as you could ever be. So I think, yeah, so building that kind of thing is not something you should do. You should just evaluate who's doing it in the best possible way for you and then pick the best solution for your scenario.
Yeah, I think very well put, right? So since this question is not relevant anymore, but still, Yeah, the analogy also I really liked it. Yeah, why don't you own build your own gateway, right? We still go to actually get a gateway which is available out there, but then we want to build an abstraction to actually operate that gateway, which is our own self, right? Yeah, that's see said that every time when we talk about a portal or a platform, there are three things comes to my mind. Who is actually the end consumer for this, right? Most of the time, it's always a small aspiration saying let's build something internal, and why don't I bring all this assets I have in a common place, and especially if I'm an organization present in multiple markets, how do I make it visible, right? The journey usually starts there, either to create a proof point or to convince a stakeholder, you know what, this is the right approach for us to go forward before the ambition becomes big. At least I always keep telling about aspiration to reality. Sometimes this aspiration starts, and then they 6 months 1 year into the road, they completely forget who are they building, even building this for. Is it for internal audience? Is it for our partners outside? Is it for our consumers outside? Or is it basically to showcase what we are as an organization, right? What is the fundamentals an organization should actually take as proof points before getting into such a journey? It can be an SME spending 10K to build something, or a large organization spending $1 million to build it, right? What is your take, Eric, there?
I think, ideally, your APIs should be as used as much as possible, right? That should be your goal. And not all APIs will be exposed to the public, that's for sure. But some maybe, or some may just be exposed to partners, right? So I think there is this idea of designing things in a way that potentially these things could be externalized. That was, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of that, right? Like the good old Bezos mandate from, I think, 2002, like a
Yeah.
long time ago, right? Where the mandate was within Amazon, right? Every API should be designed as if it should be externalized. Not all of them will be, but some of them may be, and we don't know, right? But we shouldn't make decisions beforehand and be ready for whatever potential we have in front of us. And I think that's what still is like good guidance in terms of trying to make sure that people build capabilities in a way that it's easy to consume for whoever might be out there, and then just get it out there and see what's happening. And maybe some of these APIs will flourish and others maybe still remain restricted. But yeah, it's kind of a long-term bet, I would say, in terms of, which ones will work, which ones won't quite as well, maybe. But it's kind of I would say, a long-term strategy you should really follow there.
Yeah, because there's always a challenge, because when you start building something small for internal, say for just a particular market, and then when the ambition becomes big and you try to actually enhance or extend that, that's where the challenge happens, right? What you build for a house may not fit even a market in that case, but most of the people do it. And again, and some people take scaling very easy, and because that's another question which I was also asking you, because as far as the runtime is not really something you're focusing on, it's going to be design time. You can scale it horizontally, vertically at will. But yes, unless until you have a very clear long-term vision, at least looking forward 3 years from now, I don't think this is not a journey for someone to start. It's not a college project. That's all I keep telling. But a lot of companies start this as a project with no investment, and then at some point, I've done that one of myself as well, right? To create to get people out of the real transversal journeys of not stop using tight contracts. Let's start using REST. Let's start using UPI. But to create a proof point, this is how the journey starts. With that, I also want to get into another segment, which is where I see with when I talk to any of the prospects. When I was running API ecosystem, I thought this naturally happens. But then when I come to the other side, I feel it's not a natural happening, but it's what we do it. A multi-gateway issue.
Hmm.
Every large organization I talk to, trust me, bare minimum of three gateways, which they know.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Along the journey, we find for fourth one as well, right? So now that in the current era, there is only two ways of looking at it. Either I should really put my foot down, I'm happy to take that time, spend that money, and then consolidate to a single gateway, which is very time consuming, not practically possible, depends on what you're running today. Second option, go with one of the solutions like company like us, build a nice looking abstraction on top, and then survive with it. But then behind the scene, this is all looking good till when agent came into the equation. Now, it is not about someone building an abstraction on top. Is that asset even efficient for you to extend the journey or even think about an agent journey, right? What is your take? Is multi gateway still a challenge? At least in my view, 90% of the organization I still see running at least three of them or two of them. And again, in the mix of hyperscalers coming with multiple flavors, do you think is that something we need to address when you start considering about building a platform or a portal for a large organization?
So when you say a challenge, I'm not, I mean, I would say, like you said, right, in most of larger organizations, it's just a reality. It's not something you can, it's not something to have an opinion on, right? It's just like that's how it is. So I think it's more interesting to talk about how to deal with it. So I'm not quite sure, it's like I'm yeah, sure. I mean, in a perfect world, it would be great if they only had one. Um, but we're not living in a perfect world. So what are we even discussing, right? It's like that's not what's gonna happen for you.
Yeah, see, it's not going to happen, but I think now, since they are trying to actually get the foundation right, get that cleansing going, they have to make a decision, one of them, because more and more when they're trying to actually become more uniform to present themselves when it comes to about building an agentic engine or thinking about building extensions, it's now again as simple as even having a common standardized auth model, right? I'm running an X gateway which runs on API key. I run a Y gateway which runs on work to a two-legged work to. I run another gateway which only supports MTLS for the current model. And then I'm talking about a standardized catalog running in three different gateways, becoming a challenge, right? Of course, we are not living in an idle world, but if some organization living in this scenario, what should be the right first step for them to take? And if that you think, or it's in our view, if you think that's the right step, why do you think they should take it?
Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to try to get to just one API gateway. I think that's just not going to be the reality for you. Even if you can somehow make it happen now, maybe in a year or two, you'll acquire another company or whatever, and then, well, you have another gateway, right? So I don't think that's, I think it's much more productive to think about, okay, what are the constraints of the approach to give in to the reality of multiple gateways? Um, yeah, there are some constraints, there are some things you can't control as tightly anymore, but that's, I think, doable. We have a lot of experience with how to do that. So I would definitely, my approach always would be to say, okay, you have a heterogeneous landscape that you have to live with, and you want to get that to some point where you consolidate that into a view that is as unified as you can make it, and then you make it available to consumers as well as you can possibly do that, right? And I think there are limitations across all of these steps, but I think we have a pretty good idea of how that should look like, and that would be my approach of doing that. And in the sense of trying to have a homogeneous landscape nowadays, it's probably like a lost cause. So just deal with the fact that it's not going to be like that.
Yeah, thanks for acknowledging that, Eric. I just want to hear from you because,
And
yeah,
we just saying that for our listeners, we did not agree on that beforehand. So
Yeah, yeah, but that's because it's very important because most of them think eh, we have to move from heterogeneous to homogeneous, which is not even the approach to
No.
think. You in the long run, and I have I'm just so tempted to give a use case, but which I don't want to call it out. But yeah, along the journey, there is time lost, there is a lot of money lost, and then you realize maybe this is not the approach I should do it, right? How do
Can
you want to
can
do it?
can can you give us the use case making anonymous?
Yeah, see, imagine there was a large organization which was running very successfully with one of the large gateway providers across the globe, very successful, operating in 35, 30, 40, 30, 45 markets. One fine day, someone who become the new chief architect said, you know what? There is another gateway out there. Maybe we should think about taking a couple of business verticals to move to this new gateway and then see all the enterprise things can still run it. Is there a reason? Is there a dollar value reason? Answer is no. Is there an efficiency? Answer is no. Why? Because we need to be multi-cloud. We need to be on multi-CSP. So let's not stick with one provider. Let's go with another provider. 12 months into the journey, they realized even taking 10% of their existing APIs is not practically possible, right? And then what happened today? 75% of the load runs on the existing gateway. 25% for the sake of getting a 5-year deal, they're running on the other gateway. And now, luckily, there are companies who are actually made them not do any changes in the consumer or external customers are not being impacted. But then this is again a journey which people have to really take it seriously because this is not a small game, especially when organizations running north of 3,000, 4,000 APIs. One fine day, someone makes a decision, you know what, this gateway is sleek, this gateway is handy for us to like maybe think about, and maybe we again, one, always the game starts with purely with dollar value, and then some points when they start going north, and then halfway into the journey, they understand maybe this migration is not even worth it, and they stop it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what it is. Right. Let's do the next thing. This is something which is what I would also want to understand. A lot of companies are now really investing on this space. What I would like to ask you a different question is there are a lot of people already invested building platforms and portals out there, right? It's whether large size organization, small size organization, there are things already out there. Is there any merit in leveraging and reshaping it to start becoming agentic and AI friendly? Or do you think they have to redraw, go back to the drawing board and start from scratch? What's your take?
I don't think going back to the drawing board and starting from scratch is a good idea. Um, I had I I had this thing last December at API Days Paris where I just was asking a whole bunch of people like, what do you think? How does the API space change with AI? And some people thought, oh, we don't even need APIs anymore. And I don't know how that would work. And then others said, we don't care. It's just another consumer. Um, so for me, it's somewhere in the middle. I think that you have to think about the differences of AI consumers. I think AI consumers are different because they are not the human developers that we use to design and publish our APIs for. So I think that's really something that we also have to keep in mind where we can say, okay, our portal is not just for humans, basically, it's also for machines, right? I think that's the big shift that I think all of the portals or whatever you call these or the marketplaces, right? They will have to figure out how to address that. I think in my mind, right, it's a question of how well are your APIs described so that they can easily be consumed. How well are they even designed, right? Are they maybe designed to fine-grained? I think that's also an interesting question. And then also the question of, can I help my consumers somehow to consume those APIs better? So I think, I mean, we've been, which is a good thing, right? But we've been focused a lot on humans as consumers of our portals. And I think thinking about machines, like what is different for machines when they consume our portals. And I think there are differences. And yeah, how to do that best, I think that's something where we still have to learn more. But yeah, that's the journey we're all on. And it'll be interesting. I'm genuinely happy to be in that space to, see like how are things happening over the next year or two, because it's just going to be very interesting to see how the space evolves.
Yeah. The best part is I'm actually part of one, so I'm actually like every day when I talk
Yeah.
to someone. Yeah, but and again, that's what we also tell all our prospects and clients. You know what? Yeah, it's not that first, if I ask someone to give me 10 different requirements of what you're looking for, an agent-friendly portal, I'm still getting a lot of very, very interesting answers. But yeah, with that, this is one of my favorite things I want to ask you, Eric, right? The world is now debating. I have invested $1 million running a lot of peaceful API gateways, and now the world start looking at AI gateway, right? And to give a simple example, we were running REST peacefully. We don't care about state because the beauty is about it stateless, right? Now I'm seeing a lot of ambassadors talking about the gateway now has to hold the context, has to have meaningful state for you to actually why you should consider an AI gateway. It's a very high level example, right? So are we telling that people and organizations who are running API gateway should take a deep look and start running an AI gateway? If yes, what will be the balance for them to consider to start still running and operating on API gateway and then move things to an AI gateway? Or it should be one gateway which can consolidate both. What's your take?
Okay, so I'm a guest on your podcast. Um, I really like your question because I think it's super important. But I think what most organizations nowadays, as far as I figured it out, I just tried, what they are saying when they talk about AI gateways is they talk about gateways for AI services. So, gateways for like LLMs and these kind of things. So I think that's the terminology that people tend to use. So I think that's a good thing to have. Whether we will call these things this or not, I don't quite know. Um, I think what you also have here, which is quite different in my mind, would be what is it to have a gateway that negotiates between AI consumers and API providers, right? So, which is, in my mind, a totally different thing. And what makes this discussion really hard, I'm sorry for doing that to you, but we don't have good names for these things right now, right? We don't even have the right names to call these kind of things. What you're putting here right now, in my mind, is more the MCP kind of thing, right? Which is, to me, very different from what most people mean when they say AI gateway, right? It's a very different term. Both of them are very important, and it's bad that we as an industry don't have good terms to talk about them. I do think there is a lot of potential in that idea of how should MCP or whatever comes past it, how should that work? And I'm really happy that I have this weird video effect there.
Yeah.
What is that doing? Well, thank you, Apple. Um, but yeah, so yeah, I think that's and just by discussing those terms, right? I think we have established that yes, this is a very nascent space. We don't even know what to call things. I think that very kind of narrow slice of what most people mean by AI gateway now. That's a useful thing, but that's a very, very specific slice. What you're saying there is yes, thank you for pulling up that slide. By the way, the MCP rabbit hole, we should probably have another 4 hours for discussing that. Right? But I think that's what most people are really struggling with. It's like, how do I expose my capabilities through AI consumers to that nice little robot down there? And I think there's huge potential in there, but not just in the gateway sense of how to manage it, but also in what should I even expose, right? It's like, should those be very fine-grained APIs, or should I have larger grained, more coarse-grained APIs that work better for agents because they don't have to understand as many different things to get stuff done? So yeah, I think again, right? So I basically I joined my current job because I think that's just an exciting space to be in. I don't think anybody has definitive answers. And I think mostly, maybe my main thing before I let you talk again, but don't just use words these days, assuming that the other side is understanding the same thing. So what I've experienced over the last couple of weeks is like, if I say AI gateway, the other side has wildly different opinions on what that actually is, right? So it's inconvenient, but because we are in that rapidly evolving space, I think we have to be careful of terminology and trying to figure out what is even worth addressing, and always making sure we actually talk about the same thing, which is sometimes harder than you might think it is.
Yeah, see, Eric, why did I want to bring this question? I see the participants list. I've seen a lot of senior people in that list who are have to make this decision maybe by mid next year. Should I bring an AI
Tomorrow.
gateway? Yeah. So yeah, I see a lot of architects there, and I know a couple of head of technologies there. So they will be put into the situation to make a decision Q1, Q2 next year, saying, okay, if I need to start establishing my agent journeys, then do I really need to look for AI gateway? If yes, what are the options? That's the reason
Yeah.
for the question. Beautiful segue, digging into my MCP rabbit hole, right? Why is
Let's
this
go.
term so misused? Every day when I wake up, I see something new for MCP. And every person I speak, tech, non tech, product, banker, all of them have an amazing. The only thing I didn't ask is my 7-year-old. Maybe she'll have another answer for MCP as well, right? So,
Probably.
how do you think? See, because the biggest challenge for us, if I talk to some organization who wants to get into the agent journey, the first thing is like, oh, we need to be MCP ready. Then I want to ask again. I have to, since it's a prospect, so I have to ask a very polite question. So, what is your understanding of being MCP ready, right? So, I always put is into two buckets. Are you telling me that you want to take your existing API assets, build a wrapper on top, and make it MCP ready? What we call it as MCP server is hosted. It's currently available for your agent to communicate. Or are you talking about writing a service and then making discoverable for either an internal or external agent to look into it? Most of the time, I think they always fall into bucket one because I've written 500 APIs. I want to be MCP ready, agent communication ready. Now, can you make me ready? Right? What is, I know, I'm sure, Eric, you would have had another 10 definition of this. What do you think in the market, especially the tech audience or the not tech audience, have to get a clarity of what MCP is about and where we are heading with that?
Yeah, that's an easy question to answer. Thank you. Yeah, I think for most people, NCP is, even though it's like a very well-defined technology, right? I mean, you can read the specification and stuff. But I think for most people, it's almost more like a synonym for how do I make digital capabilities available to AI things, right? That's kind of, I think that's my reading of it most of the time. It's like I've heard if I want my AI stuff, my agents to be able to take action, get information, whatever, MCP is the way to go, right? And that for now is true. That's kind of what we have. Um, but I think in most cases, right, that's what I hear, or that's what I think I hear when people talk about MCP. It's not that they're particularly interested in MCP as a technology or really understand how it works or think that, yeah, I really want that technology. It's more that, yeah, I need to connect my little cute robot that you have there to real world stuff, right? Like, so how do I do that? MCP is going to do that for me. And then I think the huge questions along the way is like, A, is that even the best way to do it? B, if it were, would APIs just feed into that? Would the APIs that you have actually feed into that, right? So I think there's a lot of hand-holding involved. So for me, MCP nowadays is mostly, it's like a magical term, right? That like connects the AI promise to the real world. And it kind of does that because that's the best technology we have available right now. Personally, I think it's really bad at doing that. It wasn't even designed for doing that mostly. It can also do that, but maybe not in the best possible way. So, but that as an aside, right? So I think the way you have to read that when people say that to you is more that, okay, let me rephrase that, right? So what you want to do is you want to build AI-based applications that are able to access data, access capabilities, do things in the real world, because that's what you think will help you do valuable things. So let's talk about those valuable things. So I think my personal strategy has been the sooner you can get away from having like MCP discussions and more like where do you think you can create value, right? And where do you see blockers for that? I think that's much more helpful. And I think in some regard, right, MCP is kind of like almost blurring our vision as to what we really want to do, and just says like MCP, the answer to everything, right? It's like, well, probably
Yeah, at
not.
some point they interchangeably also talk about A2 and MCP as a family together. At least I think now the world has started drawing parallels for that. That's not anymore. Yeah, I think with that we have come to end of a session. So we have some interesting questions, a couple of questions. I think we're just
Okay.
on. Yeah. So we can take a couple of questions for another 1 minute. So Eric, do you want to go for it? So I think there's a question from Stefan. Could AI agents be used to hack or tank platforms? I'm thinking of attacks, tanks. That's his first question. And his second question is, or does one use MCP to assist in writing APIs? It's Stefan again.
Okay. I'm not sure I'm fully understanding the first one, so let's go for the second one. Um, does one use MCP to assist in writing APIs? Sure. I mean, that's a totally, I would say that's a completely different view on MCP, and maybe one that's much more in line with what MCP was really designed to do, right? So kind of, how do I make my Claude code assistant better, right? It's like, how do I give it access to additional capabilities? And for that, it's really good because that's what it has been designed for. It was never designed to be the general mechanism to access APIs. It's just like that's something you can use it for in some shape or form. But additionally, it was mostly designed to help you improve these kind of coding assistants to pull in additional stuff, right? So yeah, I think in response to that question, that's the main use case actually it was designed for. We're massively misusing or kind of like extending it nowadays for all kinds of things it was never really intended for. But well, we'll see how that goes.
All right. I think we were 3 minutes short of we're overshot, but yeah, I would like to thank Eric. Thank you so much, and I'm sure we have given some. These are not diplomatic answers and questions. Usually, what you heard in a podcast, but I'm sure my fellow corporate colleagues would have enjoyed this session because these are the questions that always they want to ask someone. I hope we have clarified to some extent. Thank you so much, and I would like to thank everyone who joined the session today, and I would wish Eric, safe travel back home. Would love to see you in Zurich back, and I would thank everyone who joined for the session. And wait for our next session with something interesting. And we are trying to find someone as interesting as Eric for the next session too. Thank you so much, and bye.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, and yeah, have a great day, everybody.